Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday, and the patch notes for patch 10.20 have been posted, and that means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch, and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 10.20 is a very small patch here, guys, so I pretty much will talk about every change, but not for very long because it is very tiny, and it tends to be like this, especially in preparation of preseason, which is coming before too long, so Riot can't tweak things too much because preseason is going to shake up everything anyways, and Worlds obviously just happened, so a bunch of changes already happened on that regard, so this is basically just a solo queue focused patch in order to try and get things into a good spot, so if you're playing solo queue, they can kind of tweak some things here and there. Jumping on right away with the changes, Aatrox is getting some of his late game scaling buffs here. World Ender's self-healing is now up to 100% at max rank from 70%, so that's an absolutely huge buff, but it does require Aatrox to go all the way to late game, which is historically where he's been quite weak, so I do like this buff. It makes him a little bit better in those late game team fights that he's ordinarily struggled with. Braum is getting a small buff here, specifically targeting his solo queue performance. Winter's Bite mana cost has been decreased, and the base damage has been very slightly increased. I'm a little hesitant about these changes. It feels like every time Braum Q receives any changes, he becomes meta or stops being meta, so we'll see how this works out for him, but at the very least, at the meantime, it's a very nice quality of life buff. Alawi's getting a very small quality of life buff here as well. Her tentacle spawn cooldown has been decreased across the board, and it now scales every level. So Alawi has fewer power troughs where she levels up but doesn't get any more tentacles than she used to. Now she'll be able to almost constantly spam tentacles in lane, which increases her power, especially in those later stages of the game. Getting more tentacles gives her more power and gives her more team fighting prowess, so I do like this particular change. Karthus has a very small nerf here aimed at getting him out of the bottom lane and giving him a few more weaknesses, especially in the early stages of the game. His base armor has been decreased, so he's slightly weaker against AD carries and is slightly weaker against the mid lane assassins that can prey on him. So Karthus across the board will be able to be exploited more often. Kassadin has a similar nerf on this patch. Riot are trying to make it so that he's a little more exploitable in lane because right now he's too easily able to just stonewall a lane, especially with fleet footwork, and just kind of survive until the point he reaches the late game, at which point he one-shots your whole team while being unable to escape from him due to Rift Walk. As a result, his shield on Null Sphere has been reduced by 20 at its first rank, scaling back up to its regular value by the time it hits max rank. This means that Kassadins that are opting for their early Emax won't be able to protect themselves as effectively and will have to put some points in a Null Sphere in order to not die quite as hard as they currently do. Katarina is getting a small nerf here. Riot are trying to nerf her down in skilled and elite games because she's able to sort of snowball advantages early on with her roaming. Her dagger retrieval damage ratio has been nerfed very slightly, so if Katarina is still getting those damage, the dagger spins off. She's not doing as much damage as she was before. It's a very small nerf, and usually this is because she's building Hextech Gunblade right off the bat, so she's getting that bonus attack damage. So this is just nerfing that away and saying you're not going to do as much as you're used to doing. Kled has a very small nerf here. This is mostly targeted at getting him out of the mid lane because the magic resistance he's got has been nerfed down. This opens up the opportunity to bully Kled in the top lane with AP damage champions. So something like a Kale or like a Rumble will be doing slightly more damage to him. This also primarily though gets him out of the mid lane where a lot of mages will be able to bully him more effectively due to the MR reduction he's received. Lulu is getting a small nerf on this patch. She's been very strong, especially by buffing up her AD carries offense as well as their defense. So Riot are nerfing down her ability to increase their offense and focusing her more squarely on being a defensive enchanter by nerfing the attack speed she grants with Whimsy. It's down by 10% at max rank, so she won't get as much value out of this ability by using offensively and is more encouraged to save it to use defensively for the polymorph. The Maokai bar is being lowered on this patch because he is really just being oppressive in the top lane, especially just bullying other champions. Bramble Smash's base damage has been decreased by 20 at its maximum rank, which is fine. That's usually his first max anyways, so he should be doing less damage overall and giving other champions more room to play in the top lane. Nunu is receiving another small nerf on this patch. His base armor has been reduced by 3. Again, that looks very small, but because jungle monsters mostly do physical damage, across the board it means that Nunu will be slightly less healthy getting through the jungle, which makes him slightly more risky when he goes for PvP ganks or especially skirmishing for scuttle crabs, so he won't be quite as oppressive to deal with in the early stages of the game. Rise is receiving a small buff on this patch, right? We're really trying to make sure he wasn't going to be a pick ban champion for Worlds, so they probably hit him harder than he needed to be hit. So Rise is receiving a small buff on this patch. Overload's damage has been increased by 10 at all ranks, so he'll be able to deal slightly more damage than he's used to. It's a small enough buff that I'm not worried about Rise immediately becoming meta again, and it's nice if you are a fan of the Blue Man. Scion has a very small damage buff to monsters, so if you're playing Jungle Scion, this will be actually quite efficient because the 1.5 AD ratio on Decimating Smash against monsters means he'll really be able to do some damage. There's the potential that the old Scion Cheese strategy comes back where he dies to the enemy team's buff camp at level 1, kills it in passive, then respawns. He's still got their buff because he was executed. He teleports back to lane. He's got your blue buff. That strategy might come back because of this fairly significant buff, but you're just playing him regular jungle. It's not that big of a deal. Urgot, talking about jungle, Urgot is getting some jungle-specific buffs here. So Purge does 50 damage to minions and monsters now, and Echoing Flames deals more damage to monsters than it used to. So Urgot jungle might actually be more of a thing than it used to be nowadays because he does have these very small jungle quality of life buffs. Finally, Varus is getting a buff on this patch. He has been really tamped down after the last round of nerfs, so Riot are trying to buff him back up very slightly. Hail of Arrows base damage has been increased by 10 at all ranks, so he'll be doing slightly more damage with that, and Chain of Corruption's cooldown is down by 10 seconds at all ranks, so he'll have more access to that. These are very small buffs. They don't immediately bring back the AD lethality Varus build that was running rampant. It just makes Varus feel slightly better to play, especially in his on-hit builds. Finally, one more thing here. Relentless Hunter is being nerfed. It is massively outperforming other runes, especially in skilled mid lanes. So Riot are nerfing it down, so it gives significantly less movement speed overall. It gives more movement speed per bounty hunter stack, so you can still kind of stack it up to a similar value that you were before, but it's still giving less movement speed overall, so you won't be able to roam quite as efficiently with it. And that's really it, guys. Like I said, 1020 is a very, very small patch this week, so don't worry about it too much. Just some very small tweaks to a couple of champions who could have been using it. Let me know what changes you're most excited for down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and a patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.